Good evening, students. So we were discussing in our previous session on registration, and we have not yet completed the full part. So today we will complete the complete registration, because we set a slow tone to see that how we could grasp the concept of registration, and we have understood the technical aspects majorly. So today we will deal with other aspects. Okay. So is there any questions? No questions. So during the process, during the course of the class, if there's any questions you could ask, let me kind of start from where we left. So we were discussing on registration, that registration is for supply from a state and not to a state. That's the reason it is always taken from the place where we take the opt for the registration will be from the place where I make a supply. Okay. And the threshold limit of a person, okay, having places of business in more than one state or union territory gets reduced to 10 lakhs only when such person makes taxable supply from any of the special category states. So firstly, we'll have to see the overall threshold, and we know that the threshold limit is 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs in case of all states 40 lakhs. In case of special category 6 states, it is 20 lakhs. Now for only 4 category of states, T and MM, these 4 category of 4 states, you will take registration if you cross 10 lakhs. Now the question is, if you have branch in those 4 states and if you have branch in other states, will you have to take registration in that state compulsorily? The answer is you will have to take registrations. The limit will be reduced to 10 lakhs in all the states if you make a taxable supply from any of the special category states. If you do not make any taxable supply from such special category states, then you don't have to register. This example will help us understand. There was some confusion. Now let us understand this clearly. Uday Enterprises is engaged in supply of taxable goods in Maharashtra. It also supplies alcoholic liquor for human consumption from Nagaland. Its turnover in the current financial year is 34 lakhs in Maharashtra and 11 lakhs in Nagaland. Okay. Now, since Uday Enterprises is exclusively engaged in making taxable supply of goods from Maharashtra, the applicable threshold limit for obtaining registration remains at 40 lakhs. It will not get reduced to 10 because alcoholic for human consumption are non-taxable supplies. Okay, so that's the reason the limit does not get reduced to 10 lakhs. Had they made any taxable supplies in Nagaland, then it would have got reduced. In the given case, the aggregate turnover of Uday Enterprises, aggregate turnover is the total turnover is exceeding 40 lakhs. So it's liable to obtain registration, but in a state where it is making a taxable supply. In Maharashtra, it's making a taxable supply, so it will register only in Maharashtra and not in Nagaland. All questions related to ITC, this is out of the syllabus, Janapati. So you could ask at the ITC session itself. So 20 lakhs in other states limit may interstate supply also included are in TNMM and 6 states also. That exclusive supply, okay, that is only there for this 40 lakh limits, not for others. So in other cases, if they cross 10 lakhs and 20 lakhs, you will have to take registration. What if the person makes taxable supply, but he has not fixed establishment and supplies of online service or goods? So if it is online service or goods, he will have to take registration in one state. So the criteria of having a fixed establishment elsewhere is for an additional place. But if he has a turnover, okay, and is crossing the threshold, then he will have to take registration at a fixed place. Now, if he does not have a fixed place, then he will have to take registration at his residential place, because that's the place where he is residing. And if it's a company will have a establishment, right? Because in a certificate of incorporation also for a company law purpose, you will have to mention one address. So you will have one proper place for all forms of businesses. So that place you will have to register. Yeah, we will have to remember the straits and the threshold limit for 10, 20, and 40 lakhs. I have two business registration on one PAN for aggregate turnover. Okay, two business registration on one PAN for aggregate turnover. Should I take both the business supplies? Yes, for aggregate turnover, you have to take both the business supplies. The concept of aggregate turnover itself is all businesses put together and all entities within the same PAN has to be aggregated. For cess, also you can get ITC, but there are some conditions on cess that if the cess cannot be utilized with your CGST and SGST, the input tax credit of cess can be utilized only for cess of any output cess which you have. Cess can be utilized only against cess. If instead of alcohol, he has petrol bunk in Nagaland, even petrol pump is outside of GST, right? So on petrol pump also, it'll be the same criteria because 5 petroleum products are outside the scope of GST. The answer will still be same in that case. Correct. So means only for goods, 40 lakhs means intrastate. Correct. Only in that 40 lakhs case, it will applicable because that limit is only applicable for 40 lakhs. Okay. So once we are clear with this, now let us see what happens the effective date of transfer of business. So in case of death of a proprietor, the effective date of transfer will be the date of transfer or succession. And in case of amalgamation, the date from which the ROC issues the fresh certificate of incorporation. And it will not be from the date of court order. Now, let us understand that we have understood the procedure for registration. Now there is a special section, which is section 24, which says that in these instances, in these following scenarios, you will have to compulsorily take registration and the threshold will not apply. Okay, so irrespective of your turnover, you have to take registration. Then there is another section saying that section 23, which says that 24 says compulsory registration. Then 23 comes and says that, okay, compulsory registration, but to that compulsory registration also, there is an exception saying that in the following cases, compulsory registration will not be required. So my highlights here is a combination of 24 and 23. Section 24 compulsory registration is highlighted in blue color, and this is compulsory registration. And in case of okay, exceptions will be mentioned over here in another color. So these are all exceptions, and the blue highlights are compulsory cases. So first category where compulsory registration is required is person making interstate taxable supply. Okay, so any person who is making any interstate taxable supply, for him the threshold will not apply, and he will have to take registration compulsorily. But again, then 23 comes to a rescue, says that if you're doing taxable services, interstate taxable services, then you don't have to take compulsory registration. Which means what? First, if I do any taxable supply of goods, okay, intrastate, the limit we know it applies. Now, interstate transaction, when I do, if I do a interstate transaction of goods, say in a state of Karnataka, which is not under the 10 lakhs or 20 lakh limits, the limit is 40 lakhs. So if I'm doing taxable supply of goods in Karnataka, if I do intrastate, 40 lakh rupees. If I do interstate, then from that interstate date onwards, I have to take registration and take a scenario of supply of services. If I'm making intrastate supply of services, then the limit is 20 lakhs. Now, if I make interstate, 24 said that you have to take registration, but this exception under 23 said that if you are making intrastate supply of services also, you don't have to take registration. So effect is if you're making any interstate supply of taxable services, you still do not have to take registration until you touch 20 lakhs. So why a compulsory registration, then an exemption of this sort is, So compulsory registration will stick on, but this exemption can be withdrawn anytime in the future. So that's why government has put it as an exception. Okay, so the person making interstate taxable supply has to compulsory register. The exception is a person making a taxable supply of services. Another exemption is if it's a notified handicraft goods. If there are notified goods or there are some handicraft goods which are notified, that if you're dealing with that, then that limit of 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs, and 40 lakhs also will apply. Okay. So person making interstate taxable supply, firstly, you have to register, but there are two exceptions if they're making taxable services supply and dealing in supply of notified goods, notified handicraft goods. Second is in case of a casual taxable person. If a casual taxable person is making any taxable supplies, then he does not have any exception of limit. So if who's a casual taxable person, let us understand that I am a person who is registered in my state of Karnataka. Now there is an exhibition in Delhi. Okay, if I am supplying some goods from there, okay, I have to carry goods from here to there. From there, I'm supplying. So I will have to charge Delhi GST and CGST. So because it's a location of supply is from Delhi. So since I'm going there and selling, I'll have to take a temporary registration because I'm not setting up a fixed establishment there. If I'm not setting up a fixed establishment, it means it's an establishment which I'm holding for a temporary period. So in that case, I will be getting a separate registration called as a casual taxable person. So we will discuss on the casual taxable person also in some time, but understand for now that a casual taxable person has to first take the registration and then deal with the taxable goods. So if I'm going there and I'm expecting that I'll make only 10 lakhs of sales, okay, and it is below the limit, so I can't take registration. That option is not there. If you are a casual taxable person, then the threshold limit will not apply. You will have to register as soon as you go to that state. Okay. Again, the exception is if you're dealing in notified handicraft goods, then you will get this exemption, not in any other case. And the third exception is person required to pay under reverse charge. Okay. So we know that in reverse charge basis mechanism, we have said that if any business entity, if the recipient is a business entity, then he has to pay RCM. Now, if this recipient is liable to pay, like some category says that if you're registered, you have to pay. Some category says if you're business entity, you have to pay. Some category says if you're just business, doing any business, you have to pay, right? So if there is a business and the liability is there on the businessman, then he will have to register, then the threshold will not apply. Now the exception there is person making exclusive outward supply, which is liable to RCM. Now a lawyer provides services, right, on which GST is paid by the recipient always, unless he makes supplies to any individuals. That is also accepted because that is also, there is an exemption for that. So if a person who is making only outward supplies on which reverse charge is payable, then he need not register, irrespective of the turnover, because tax would be paid by the recipient itself. Example could be a advocate, a GTA services. GTA provides services only to corporates, or he is not taking registration and only the recipient is paying it, right? In that case, a GTA will not be liable to take registration because he's making exclusively outward supply, which is liable to RCM. Okay, another example of 20 lakhs in Sikkim and 36 lakhs in Karnataka. So we should register in both the states. Yes, because Sikkim, the limit is 20 lakhs and you're touching 20 lakhs in Sikkim. So you will have to take registration in both the states, provided you're making taxable supply in both the states. गुंजन कुमार, अगर अलग अलग ब्रांच जीएसटी लेगा तो एनी बिजनेस तो उनका टर्नओवर अलग अलग होगा. जीएसटी रिटर्न फाइलिंग के लिए अलग अलग होगा, लेकिन एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर कब रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना है ये कैलकुलेट करने के लिए सभी बिजनेसेस के टर्नओवर को ऐड करना पड़ेगा। Sir, in goods supply, trader also provide transportation of the that goods only, service, then goods supply of both. So where he is providing transportation, okay, especially understand the concept of composite supply. So when you're making transportation of goods and the main supply is of goods itself, so the primary supply is the goods, not transportation. So it will not be considered as a service. It will be treated as a composite supply of goods only and not supply of transportation services. So what does this say? हिंदी में एक बार समझा देंगे on the first part कि अगर आप कुछ भी इंटरस्टेट सप्लाई करते हो, एक स्टेट से दूसरे स्टेट को इंटरस्टेट कहते हैं, तो अगर आपका जो थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट है 10 लाख 20 लाख 40 लाख जो हमने बताया था, वो होता है जब आप इंट्रा स्टेट विद इन द स्टेट सप्लाई करते हो। अब जब भी इंटर स्टेट सप्लाई शुरू कर देते हो तब आपका थ्रेशोल्ड 0 से ही शुरू हो जाता है। ठीक है, अगर मैं इंटर स्टेट सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स करता हूँ, ठीक है, तो मेरे 5 लाख टर्नओवर है, तब मुझे 5 लाख के ऊपर भी जीएसटी भरना पड़ेगा, मुझे 40 लाख का एक्सेप्शन नहीं मिलेगा। ठीक है, लेकिन एक एक्सेप्शन बताता है कि इफ यू आर डूइंग ओनली टैक्सेबल सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज, मैं चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट हूं, मैं इंटरस्टेट सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड करता हूं, फीस है 15 लाख की, बाकी कुछ फीस नहीं है, तो इंटरस्टेट सप्लाई हो गया तो रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा। लेकिन एक एक्सेप्शन बताता है कि आप अगर इंटरस्टेट करते हो फिर भी रजिस्ट्रेशन लेने की जरूरत नहीं है। ठीक है, सो दैट इज व्हाट फर्स्ट पॉइंट जो हमको क्लियर कर देता है। हैंडीक्राफ्ट मतलब जो स्पेशल गुड्स जो हाथ से बनाते हैं। हैंडीक्राफ्ट गुड मींस दोज गुड्स व्हिच आर मेड बाय सर्टेन आर्टिस्ट बाय देयर हैंड्स एंड दे आर स्पेसिफाइड आर व्हाट आर द स्पेसिफिक हैंडीक्राफ्ट गुड्स, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज हैंडीक्राफ्ट आइटम्स। Third point, person required to pay under RCM. I've explained, the exemption. If I'm a lawyer and I'm providing legal services and the tax on that is always under RCM, so then I don't have to take registration under GST because I'm providing all my services on which GST is paid under reverse charge mechanism. And non-resident taxable person. So how a casual taxable person has no limit except for those handicraft goods, a non-resident taxable person, a person who's coming from outside India and doing business in India, is called a non-resident taxable person. For him also, there is no limit. The fourth category is a e-commerce operator. Okay. If it's a e-commerce operator, I'm supplying it through an e-commerce operator, then also the threshold limit will not apply. Exception is again supply of services. Okay, like how in case of interstate taxable supply, there is an exception of services. Similarly, when I'm making any supply through an e-commerce operator of services, then I don't have to register, but otherwise I will have to. Only for services, it is exception. If I'm doing any goods through e-commerce, then from rupee 1, I have to take registration. TDS deductor also, if he's deducting TDS, then that's not a actual registration, only for the purpose of TDS deduction. So a TDS deductor need not pay any, need not wait for the threshold. He will have to take registration immediately. A agent also, for him limit does not apply. A input service distributor. Who is an input service distributor? Who distributes the credit of the branches to the respective branches? That is an input service distributor. Then online information, just 1 minute. Yeah, other category is a input service distributor. And then next category as OIDAR, which means a person who's providing online information database access and retrieval service. For him also the threshold limit does not apply. And any other person which the government may notify. So that nothing is notified by the government, but anything if they notify in the future, for them also, these threshold will not apply. So put it in a nutshell, Who is liable for liable to register irrespective of the threshold? The compulsory registration is a non-resident taxable person, person making any interstate taxable supply. Of course, we saw exception. Then persons who are required to pay tax under reverse charge, persons required to deduct TDS under Section 51, casual taxable person, non-resident taxable person, input service distributor, e-commerce operator rendering services, every e-commerce operator as well, persons required to collect tax under 52, other persons notified by the government, persons making any interstate supply, again this is repeated, persons applying for online information database access and retrieval services. ISD means a person input service distributor, which means that if all the services across your states are receiving it one place, okay, that is called as a input service distributor. This is not a input for his branch, but input for other branches. So he will distribute this credit to other branches. Okay, so he will get all the credit. He cannot utilize it to the extent of his state. He will also have to pass it to the respective registered entity, and to respective states he will have to distribute. He is called as an input service distributor. Actually, ISD is not there in the exam, but just for your understanding, a registration which receives the credit and distributes is called as an input service distributor. Yes, Harshit. We can say that only interstate taxable supply of goods. Who is a casual taxable person? As I had explained, I will explain again when we come to the casual taxable person. It's basically a temporary registration wherein you have to take a registration in another state, that is called as a casual taxable person. If a person in Tripura provided services to a person in Sikkim, then limit is 10 lakhs. But if provide goods, then not any limit compulsory to take registration. Correct. So since he is making nahi, then be 10 lakhs because that interstate ka category jo hai. Okay. Yeah, in this case also will apply because once he makes an interstate supply, then threshold will not apply. You're right. If a person supply from Manipur exempt turnover 9 lakhs and from Himachal Pradesh goods only, intrastate turnover is 30 lakhs, then not liable to make registration in both the states because in Himachal is 40 lakhs and Manipur non-taxable supply. In both the cases, he will not have to register. In both the states, he does not register. That's correct. A person who is required to deduct tax under 51 and 52, that there are some categories under 51 and 52 which says that if you supply to them, then they will have to deduct TDS. Like example, if you make payment to supply to government, then the government when it makes payment to you, it has to deduct TDS. Okay, so that deduction for the deduction of taxes from your supply, even if you supply 10 lakhs to them, they will have to deduct because it just says that deduction under GST is called as GST TDS. For that TDS, there is no threshold limit. Even if you supply goods of a value of 5 lakh rupees to a government or through an e-commerce, they will have to deduct TDS. So that says that compulsory they have to take a registration, deduct it, and pay the money to the government. Right? So 51, 52, that is TDS provisions under GST, not under income tax. Income tax TDS is separate. TDS under GST is separate. So if you're deducting taxes under GST, then you don't have to wait for the threshold to reach. You can immediately register and deduct the taxes. Now, section 23. 24, we understood what is compulsory registration. Now 23 says that people who will are not liable to register. Okay. Even though compulsory registration is there, 23 says that you don't have to register. Who are these people? Persons who are engaged exclusively in the business of supplying goods or services, which is not liable to tax, or supply of wholly exempt goods and services. So if you're exclusively supplying goods or services which is not liable to tax or which is wholly exempt supply, then you don't have to register. Example, if you're dealing in petroleum products or if you're a charitable trust and doing exclusive charitable activities, you're not doing any other service or supplying any goods on which GST is payable, then you will get the exemption. But if this, say, charitable trust is engaged in non-charitable activities, example, if they're supplying, selling of books or renting some other premise which is not within the presence, right? We understood in charitable trust that any rental service up to those limits within the presence of the premises, presence of the religious place is exempt. Now, if they have any place which is not within their precincts, then it becomes taxable. So if they do even some small activity of taxable activity, then they will have to register. Of course, provided their aggregate turnover crosses. But as an exception here is if you're doing only exempt services, you don't have to register. Then who else is not required to register is an agriculturist, and agriculturist to the extent of supply of produce out of cultivation of land. So again, if an agriculturist is doing any taxable service, he will have to register. But the exception is purely exception. It says that if you're doing only these exceptional services or services on which tax is not payable, which is exempted, then you don't have to register. Definition of agriculturist under 2 subsection 7 is an individual or HUF who undertakes cultivation of land by his own labor or by the labor of the family or by servant or wages on hired labor. So if you're taking laborers on hire, okay, still you are an agriculturist. This is the definition of an agriculturist. The persons who are not liable for registration are two. Who else? Specified people who are notified by the government. Who are they? Persons who are making only RCM supplies. So that's why we saw that exception there. That if you're making only RCM supplies, then you don't have to, which means that if I am a GTA provider and providing services to a private limited company, then GTA is not required to register. Then persons making any interstate supply of services up to 20 lakhs for TNMM states, interstate supply of notified handicraft goods, interstate supply of notified products made by craftsmen, predominantly by hand. Here again, they don't have to register. The condition is for these notified products. What are these notified products? Not for your exam, but for your understanding now. The notified products are like leather articles, wooden products, which is basically made by craftsmen, right? So there, if they are having turnover up to 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, they will only have to obtain PAN and generate a e-way bill. So without registration, how can I get a how can I generate a e-way bill? Yes, without registration also, you will get a special login and you will have to generate a e-way bill. What is a e-way bill? E-way bill is when I move any goods from one place to another place, not one state to another state, any place also. Within the state, if you are transporting any goods whose value is more than 50,000 rupees, then along with the invoice, you have to mention those details on the GST e-way bill portal and generate a e-way bill number. Okay, so that's a procedural part that you have to do that. So once you do that, the government gets notified that what movement of goods are happening. So you will have to generate the e-way bill. So generally, in all cases, you have to generate. But in case of a craftsman, since he's not required to register, but this additional condition is cast on him saying that you have to obtain a PAN and okay, then casual taxable person will not be liable for registration in case of handicraft goods and these goods which are crafts by craftsmen. Then commission agent for sale or purchase of agriculture produce. Commission agent for sale or purchase of agriculture produce. Why he will not be registered? He will not be liable to register because the registration compulsion comes once the principal is a taxable person. Who is the principal in case of agriculture produce? The farmer. Farmer or the agriculturist. Now, agriculturists primarily deal with exempted goods itself. So, principal is not a taxable person, and the supplies which is made by this commission agent should be taxable. But in this case, the supplies made by this commission agent is not taxable. right? Because under the exemptions, we saw the commission agents are dealing in agricultural goods is so if he's dealing with agriculturist products which is exempted and his commission is exempted, then he will not be liable for registration. So to put it in a nutshell, persons who are engaged, persons who are not liable to registration, not liable for registration under 23, under section 23 is persons engaged exclusively in supplying goods or services not liable to tax. So if I'm dealing with purely exempted services, purely those goods on which tax is not payable, then I don't have to register. Then agriculturist also is not liable to register, limited to supply of produce out of cultivation of land. Then persons making only reverse charge because tax will be paid by the recipient, he will also not be liable for registration. Persons making any interstate supplies of taxable services up to 20 lakhs. Persons making interstate taxable supplies of notified handicraft goods up to 20 lakhs. And casual taxable persons making interstate taxable supply of notified handicraft goods up to 20 lakhs, 10 lakhs in case of TNMM states. Okay. Any queries? So we were discussing on what are the cases of section 23 where persons are not liable for registration. This chart makes it amply clear that the limits will be 20 lakhs. Only in case of TNMM states, it will be 10 lakhs. Wholly exempted में both intrastate and interstate. Yes, in wholly exempted, both intrastate and interstate is included. या कमीशन एजेंट क्या बोलता है मानसी, सिंपल कि जब आप एग्रीकल्चर प्रोड्यूस सेल करते हो तब आपका प्रोडक्ट एग्जेम्प्टेड है और आपका सर्विसेज भी एग्जेम्प्टेड है। ठीक है, तो इसका मतलब क्या हुआ, कमीशन एजेंट जो एपीएमसी यार्ड में एग्रीकल्चर प्रोड्यूस का कमीशन एजेंट है उसे रजिस्ट्रेशन लेने की जरूरत नहीं है। लेकिन अगर वो नॉन एग्रीकल्चर गुड्स में डील करता है तब उसे रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा। वो है कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ दिस कमीशन एजेंट। No, if Sweetie Kumari, your question is if any person supplies services or its own goods from its own website, is it e-commerce? No. The definition of e-commerce says that a person who is using technology and who is connecting buyer and seller, he is an e-commerce. If you are a buyer and using internet or a website as a mode of sale, you are not an e-commerce. You are only a supplier. The mode of supply is through a website. If X of Gujarat supply machine oil of rupees 10 lakhs and petrol 5 lakhs and supply services 6 lakhs only intrastate supply, then he liable for registration. So in his case, the aggregate turnover of 10 plus 5 plus 6 is 21 lakhs. It is not exclusive supply of goods. Then he will have to take registration and pay GST only on the supply of taxable supplies, which is machine oil taxable and supply of services taxable. On the petroleum products, he will not pay GST. You have to learn the notified handicraft products. No, you don't have to. Okay, now let us get into the procedure aspect of how do we register. What is the procedure for registration? Uh, First is to register, you have to make an application. The application is called as application form in REG01. Okay, so the registration is made in a specified form called as GST REG01. Now, before getting into the how to file an REG01, let us understand the related concepts, then we will understand the complete procedure. One is everybody has to take a registration, and there are special category of people called as UIN. Okay, UIN is unique identification number. This is equivalent to GST number, but it is not actually a GST number. It is that's why called as a unique identification number, which is a centralized UIN applicable to the territory of India. Now, whom is this UIN granted? I have to turn it here just a minute. So if any person, okay, who is basically consulate office or any kind of a United Nations organization related, okay, they will have to take a separate special registration. So any specialized agency of the United Nations organization or multilateral finance institution, wherein they don't do any supply in India, but they will have their presence in India. Like United Nations has their presence in every country, and even in India, they have a presence. Now, when they have a presence in India, they will have to take a GST registration. Why they don't make any supply? Right? Still, why they have to take registration? Because whenever you charge GST to them, they will give their number, right? And supplies to these people should be exempted. But instead of giving them exemption, you charge GST regularly and they will claim refund from the government. Okay. So that's why a person having UIN is not a registered person and he's not a taxable person. So that's why he will not have any threshold limit as such. Once he is a UIN organization, then they will take a registration called UIN number and they will claim refund for whatever GST we charge to them. Okay. Then in case of a special economic zone, who is the special economic zone? We have discussed this before as well, saying that in each state, some special zones are established. These zones are to develop that state's revenue and to give some special benefits to exporters. Okay. So special benefits to exporters are given through setting up a SEZ unit. So full form of SEZ is Special Economic Zone. These SEZ units are within the state, right? So our understanding was within the state, you can have one registration, but for the purpose of SEZ, these are treated as, even though it is in a state, it is not treated as within the country. They will be treated as special category, and any supplies what we make to SEZ is also zero rated. And when the SEZ supplies, of course, it is again zero rated because they're exporting the goods. So even if a SEZ is in one state, you will have to take separate registration for a SEZ, because SEZ by the law is considered to be a place outside India for all tax purposes. So that's why you get special treatment for SEZ units in income tax as well. In GST also, they get special treatment. And when you supply something to SEZ, you will have to take a separate registration in SEZ. And whenever you make any supplies to SEZ, you don't have to charge GST. It's a zero rated supply. Now on concept on casual taxable person and the concept of uh, non-resident taxable person. So understanding at this level is a CTP has no fixed place of business in a state. Somebody was asking question on a casual taxable person. So we'll read both casual taxable person and a non-resident taxable person. The difference between two is a person who is not having a fixed place of business in a state. Like from Cochin, one person is coming to Karnataka for an exhibition. Now he does not, he will have to sell something in an exhibition. But this exhibition is not a fixed place because it will be for a period of say 3 days or 5 days. After he sells the goods, he will go back to his state. So how will the government get revenue from it? So that's why when a casual taxable person is coming to another state where he is not having a fixed place of business, he is called as a casual taxable person. He will have to take registration in every state from where he wants to do business. So if he's coming to Karnataka for an exhibition, he'll have to take registration here. If he's going to Mumbai, he will have to take registration there. From whichever state he makes a supply, he will have to register. Contrast with non-resident taxable person, a non-resident taxable person, at least CTP is having some place in India. A non-resident taxable person does not have a fixed place of business in India itself. So he's a non-resident, as the name suggests, he comes to India and does some business. He will have to register in the state from where he again seeks to supply. What are the common points for both? Both CTP and NRTP cannot claim for this composition levy. Okay, they will have to go with regular levy itself. And there is no centralized scheme for them. Whichever state they make supply, in those respective state, they will have to take special registration. Okay. Questions? REG1 and GSTR1 is same? No, no. REG1 is the form for registration. GSTR1 is a form for mentioning your details of monthly sales. So GSTR1 is a return, REG1 is a registration application. GSTR1 is separate, GST REG is separate. Is there a time limit for SEZ for claiming exemption? No, no such time limit. Yes, Lokesh, if a person has two businesses in a same state, he can take one registration, but he wants to take two registration, then he can take two registration also. मिल्क एग्रीकल्चर गुड में आएगा, मिल्क एग्रीकल्चर गुड में नहीं आएगा, वो अलग ही आएगा, लेकिन मिल्क के लिए एग्जेम्पशन तो है. फुल फॉर्म ऑफ GSTR1, इट्स अ फॉर्म. गवर्नमेंट ने बता दिया कि GSTR1, तो उसका फॉर्म का नाम हो गया, उसका कुछ फुल फॉर्म नहीं है. Lokesh, if he has two registration in Karnataka, then it is not compulsory that he should take two registration. It's optional. He can take one registration, or if he wants, he can take two registration. Both the options are available. timeline for application. When you should apply for registration, a person who's liable to register under 22 when you cross the threshold limit, or 24 when you don't cross the threshold limit, but you have to compulsory register. That's when 24 comes. So when you have to apply within 30 days from the date on which you become liable for registration. तो आपका टर्नओवर 10 लाख से 20 lakhs 15 लाख से आपका लिमिट है 20 lakhs एज अ सर्विस. आप 19 लाख सर्विस प्रोवाइड करते हो, यू डोंट हैव टू रजिस्टर. एज सून एज यू टच 20 lakhs, तो आपका टर्नओवर आज क्रॉस हो गया विद इन 30 days. So as soon as you have done, you have to register. वो तो नहीं हो पाएगा. That's why government has given you 30 days of time, saying that once you are liable for registration, once you cross over the limit, because under 22 it is when you cross the limit. So once you cross the limit, you have to take the registration. And under 24 compulsory registration criteria, we have seen that when you have to pay under reverse charge. So if you get any services on when you have to pay reverse charge, then within 30 days from receipt of that service, you will have to register. So whenever the date triggers for registration, within 30 days from that date, you have to apply for registration. And a casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person, they have to apply for registration within 5 days prior to commencement of a business. जैसे अब exhibition कुछ हो रहा है, you want to sell it from tomorrow. You can't apply for registration today. You have to apply for that registration at least 5 days prior to the commencement of business. जैसे 10th को आपका exhibition शुरू हो रहा है, then 10 minus 5. So before 5th, you have to apply for registration. Okay. One registration per state. There is no question of centralized registration. You have to take one registration in each state minimum. If you want, you can take multiple registration. Separate state-wise registration within the state possible. And you have to mention principal place of business and additional place of business in one registration. Option to obtain independent registration with respect to each separate place of business. In such case, treated as distinct person and transaction between them will be taxable. So if you take one registration in a state with all your branches within the state together mentioned in one registration, then any supply between these branches is not taxable. But if you take separate registration, then please note that each registration will be treated as a distinct person. What is the impact? That any supplies you make from one registration to another registration, on that you have to pay GST. Okay. And if you want to take separate registration, then apply separate REG1. So if you have 10 branches and you want to apply 10 separate registration, you cannot file one REG1 and say that give me 10 separate registration. That will not be possible. You have to make 10 separate applications. Composition levy, we know that composition levy, right? That if you are dealing with any goods or restaurant services or any kind of services below 50 lakhs. For goods, it is 1.5 crores. For services, it is 50 lakhs. If you want to apply for composition, then can I apply for composition for one branch and regular for another branch? There is a restriction under composition. We also read that there, that if you opt for a regular in one place, then you cannot opt for composition for any other place of business. If one place is ineligible, then all places are ineligible. So you have to apply for composition for all the branches or regular registration for all the branches. A mixture of one place composition, one place regular is not possible. So if a trader's fair conducted in Delhi, but only advertising, not done any sale, then in this case, trader is a casual taxable person or no? So if you're sure that they will not make any supply, only going for advertising, okay, then you just have to raise a e-way bill from the regular place of business, and you can move the goods, because any movement of goods above 50,000, we have said there is a requirement of e-way bill. So you don't have to register as a CTP. You have to only use a e-way bill as a document. Move the goods and get back the goods. Within Hardik, good question. Within 30 days, we should apply or we should get? We should apply. So because as soon as you apply, government will not give it. The procedure of registration will see that once you apply, there is some deadlines for there, but the time limit for a taxpayer is once you cross the limit, within 30 days, you have to apply. What are the other aspects that apart from 22 and 24, there is a concept of voluntary registration, which says that any person who's not liable under section 22 or 24 can still get registered, which means if his turnover is below 20 lakhs or 10 lakhs, he can still voluntarily basis apply for registration. The impact is that once registered, and if your threshold limit goes below, you cannot come out of it. You will have to continue paying GST. Distinct person is two kinds. One is multiple registration in one state. Then another kind of distinct person is called as establishment of distinct person is if you have registration in one state and establishments in another state, which means what? Within the states, we understood that multiple registration. But if it is multiple states, then if you take registration in one state, other state, if you don't take registration for that unit, still these will be treated as distinct persons. So within state, registration is compulsory. Outside the state, if you make any supply, you have to charge GST even if the other state is unregistered. Let's take an example. I have a office in Bangalore, Karnataka. Now I set up a office in Maharashtra. There, if I don't take registration, okay, because I'm not doing any kind of taxable supply there, then I don't have to register. Now, if I don't take a registration there, still it is treated as a distinct person. Okay. The impact is even if I sell something from here, Bangalore to Maharashtra, and from Maharashtra, if I sell, right, since it is same, it is a branch, but within the state, if I do any supply, then it is called as a distinct person. Then because of my supply from Karnataka to that state, it will have to take registration. Even if it doesn't take registration, I will have to charge GST. Okay, so if I have a branch outside India, if I'm supplying any goods, if it doesn't take registration, I will still have to charge GST for a supply from one state to another state. That is the impact of point number B. How can two different nature of business run on the same registration? That can be, right? So one I have wholesale business, one another is a retail business. So there are two different businesses. I can take two separate registration. The only thing is composition and regular cannot be taken. Distinct person point is not clear. Take an example now. I am in Karnataka. Now I have so many districts within Karnataka. I want to expand my business. तो मैंने बैंगलोर में एक ले लिया, मैसूर, हुबली, शिमोगा, धारवाड़, मैंगलोर, कूर्ग सब जगह पे ऑफिस खोल दिया है. Now I have an option to take one registration for all of these 6 to 7 branches which I've said. I can take one registration and pay GST to the government together. Another option is I want separate registration saying that Mysore branch bada ho gaya. I will appoint a person who will do all the management of GST there. He will collect GST from the customers, claim credit of GST, whatever is there. I will not have the headache. So if I take separate registration for each of these locations, Bangalore mein separate, Mysore mein separate, Shimoga mein separate, then any kind of supply which I make between Bangalore to Mysore, from Mysore to Shimoga, they are all treated as a taxable supply. So any stock transfer which I do, that is also liable to GST. That's the impact of distinct person. Second kind of distinct person is I have a branch in Bangalore registered. Now I open a new branch in Hyderabad. So when I open a new branch in Hyderabad, if I do any stock transfer, Hyderabad branch is not registered, but it is a different state. So if I do any stock transfer on that, also I have to pay GST. That is the concept of distinct person. Clear, Tanishka? Parthasarthi, your question is composition levy within state opt regular And composition or outside state cannot apply under composition. Yes, even if you are applying for composition within a state, the other registration, other state also has to be composition itself. Mohammad Uzair, if it is composition, if it is the casual taxable person, it doesn't take 7 days. Casual taxable person will get on time, at least within 1 or 2 days, you can get the registration. Casual taxable person doesn't take 7 days time. If it takes 7 days time, you will have to plan accordingly. But generally, practically casual taxable persons, so they will be treated special separately and you will get the registration immediately. If a person is having multiple registration with same PAN, then will it be taxable even if it is of common companies branch? Yes, still it will be treated as distinct person if you have branches outside the state. For distinct persons, aggregate turnover is considered for threshold limit or individual branch. सभी के लिए aggregate turnover itself. Aggregate turnover will be considered. Supply between distinct person included in aggregate turnover? Yes, it is included in aggregate turnover. And supply within principal place of business and additional place of business not included in aggregate turnover. Yes, it is not included. Is that a casual taxable person should take registration every time he comes to sell goods? Yes, because it's a temporary registration and validity is 90 days. We'll read that complete thing. So every time he comes for exhibition, then he will have to take a registration. PAN is compulsory for registration, even for a casual taxable person. But for a non-resident taxable person, Baba, he's coming from outside India, so he will not have a PAN. For him, passport will be sufficient. So apart from NRTP, non-resident taxable person, every other person has to have a PAN. However, person under section 51, since he's deducting only TDS, he can apply through a TAN. UIN, who is a person, we discussed this UIN, that any specialized agency of the United Nations organization, why they have to take registration? For claiming refund. They are not registered person, so they don't have to file regular returns. And say they will only for UIN, they will get one centralized UN for all operations in India. Like if a United Nations has branches in say Delhi, Mumbai, and one in South. So if they have multiple organizations, multiple branches, for them it will be only one registration which they will get. And issue UI number within 3 working days from the date of submission, because you'll have to be really prompt with such organizations. So they've said once they apply within 3 days, they have to give a registration for the UIN number. Suo motu registration, which means that we know that you cross threshold limit, you have to apply, or you voluntarily have applied. That's another type of registration. The third type of registration is called as suo motu registration, which means the officer can on his own give you a registration. Why will he give? He's come for inspection and seen that you are making taxable supplies, but you're not paying GST. So he will give a registration called as a temporary registration. Suo motu means on his own motion or on his own account. When a tax officer issues a GST registration, it's called as a suo motu registration. Okay, so he will give you a suo motu registration when in case of he finds that you are liable for tax but you have not paid. He will give a temporary registration. After you receive this temporary registration, you have to submit an application, because he cannot get your details. Your details as a taxpayer, you have to submit. So as a taxpayer, you will have to submit a fresh application within 90 days of receipt of temporary registration number. If you don't feel like applying, then you have to file an appeal against this tax registration number. Now, at the time of appeal, if the officer decides that no, you are wrong, you are liable for registration, then you have to apply for registration within 30 days of the order. So two opportunities you get. Once a officer comes and finds that you are liable for registration, better register, because you know that your liability is crossing. If you feel no, my liability is not crossing, then you file an appeal. Even in the appeal, if it is rejected, then fine, don't have to take registration. But if the appeal is allowed, saying that no, what is given by the officer is correct, your application is rejected. Okay, if it is against you, then you have to apply for registration within 30 days of that getting the order. Procedure for registration, will come to this. Normal registration procedure, you have two kinds of procedure. One is through form GST REG1. This is a normal registration process for all taxable persons, casual taxable person, voluntary registration, and composite levy. Because when you apply for registration, you will have certain check boxes to tell you, ask you what kind of registration you want. Are you a taxable person? Are you a casual taxable person? Do you need voluntary registration or do you need composite registration? Then you have special registration procedure for a non-resident taxable person, for a online information database access and retrieval service person, and for a person who is applying for TDS or TCS registration under section 51 or 52. Yes, UIN is majorly applicable for foreign establishment. If a person is having two businesses in different states of threshold limit 20 lakh, 10 lakh, then what state's limit would be applicable? So for threshold will be aggregate turnover. So you have to look at the threshold limit of all states put together. Person in section 51 means a person who wants to apply for registration as a TDS deductor. Then under section 51, we said that for all the cases he has to give a PAN, but a person who's applying for a government generally, government, if they don't have a PAN, if they have only TAN number, they can give a TAN number and still get a GST registration certificate for the purpose of deduction of TDS. UIN is applicable for foreign establishment. Yes, सो मोटो registration को हिंदी में बताइए. तीन तरह के registration होते हैं निंशी. फर्स्ट इज जब मैं रजिस्टर करता हूं मेरा लिमिट क्रॉस होने पे. सेकेंड है जब मेरा कंपलसरी रजिस्ट्रेशन होता है. थर्ड इज मैं वॉलंटरी रजिस्ट्रेशन करता हूं. ये फोर्थ रजिस्ट्रेशन जो है वो है कि गवर्नमेंट जो ऑफिसर है वो अपने हिसाब से वो उनके हिसाब से भी वो रजिस्ट्रेशन आपको दे सकते हैं. जनरली फर्स्ट तीन केसेस में हम अप्लाई करते हैं हमारी लायबिलिटी अप्लाई करने के लिए, लेकिन फोर्थ केस में ऑफिसर अप्लाई करके दे सकता है क्योंकि उसने देखा है इन्वेस्टिगेशन में कि आपका सेल्स हो रहा है तो क्रॉस, लेकिन आपने रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं लिया है. तब ऑफिसर अपने एंड से रजिस्ट्रेशन लेके देगा. उसे कहते हैं TRN रजिस्ट्रेशन, मतलब टेम्पररी रजिस्ट्रेशन नंबर. उसके बाद हमको पूरा डिटेल्स देके परमानेंट रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा. उसके लिए 90 डेज टाइम मिलता है. 90 डेज में हमने अप्लाई कर दिया तो ठीक, वरना फिर वो TRN को ऑफिसर परमानेंट में कन्वर्ट कर देगा. अगर हम 90 डेज में अप्लाई करते हैं तो ठीक, वरना ऑप्शन हमारे पास है कि हम अपील पे जाए कि मेरा टर्नओवर तो क्रॉस नहीं हो रहा है, फिर भी ऑफिसर ने मुझे टेम्पररी रजिस्ट्रेशन नंबर दिया है. तो अगर सुनवाई होगी, अपील जब जाते हैं सुनवाई होती है, अपील में अगर हो गया कि नहीं आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं है तो मिलेगा, लेकिन सुनवाई में हो गया कि आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन करना ही पड़ेगा. ठीक है, क्योंकि आपको एक अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है, आपने उसको यूज किया और वहां पे बता दिया कि नहीं आपको रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना है, तो फिर आपको वो ऑर्डर से 30 दिन के अंदर आपको फ्रेश रजिस्ट्रेशन अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. Yeah, casual taxable person, he will have to take registration again and again when he has a exhibition. But there is a limit that a casual taxable person registration is for 90 days. So within 90 days, if he has multiple registration, he can use it. If there is a more gap, more than 90 days, then he will have to take multiple registrations. Time period for appeal, Vaishali, is 30 days. If you make supplies of taxable goods in the state of Gujarat and exempt supplies in Nagaland, then what will be the consequences? So if you're making an exempt supply in Nagaland, then you don't have to register in Nagaland, Mayur. You'll have to take registration only in Gujarat. because your aggregate turnover is crossing 40 lakhs, right? And you are making taxable supply in Gujarat. So you will have to take registration in Gujarat. वॉलेंट्री रजिस्ट्रेशन की वैलिडिटी की टाइम क्या है? जो भी रजिस्ट्रेशन नॉर्मल रजिस्ट्रेशन लेते हो उसकी कुछ वैलिडिटी नहीं रहती है. इट इज लाइफ टाइम. Let it be voluntary registration or a regular registration, it is one time. Only these casual taxable person and non-resident taxable person has some registration validity. How we can forgive suo motoration? Whenever the officer investigates and finds that he's made an investigation and he's found that you're making taxable supplies beyond the limit, then he will give this suo moto registration. Now let us understand the concept of registration, that how you will apply for registration. You will apply through this form GST REG 01. It has two parts. First is part A, then we have to go to part B. Once you clear part A, फिर part B का दरवाजा खुलेगा. So for applying for part A, you have to give your PAN number, you have to give your mobile number, and you have to give your email ID. Once you do give these three details, then what happens? The verification happens. How is the PAN verified? PAN is verified through verification in the portal. So interaction happens between the GST registration website and the income tax website. The name what you give gets validated from there. If it is matching, then your PAN gets validated. Then mobile number, how it get validated? You give your mobile number, OTP comes from the portal. If you enter the correct OTP, your mobile number is validated. Similarly, the email. Once these three things gets validated, then you get a temporary registration number for submission of part B. Okay, we have filled part A with PAN number, mobile number, and email ID. On successful verification, we go to part B. In part B, you get a ARN number. ARN number say you apply with part B. You will apply with requisite documents. All your certificate of incorporation, memorandum, articles of association, photograph, address proof, all those documents you will submit and you will get a acknowledgement. Okay. So, matlab aapka you have submitted the application. If this details are complete, then you will get a certificate of registration in REG 06. If these documents are incomplete, then within 3 working days, the officer has to give a notice seeking for additional documents. Okay. If he gives you this notice, then you have to reply the documents reply within 7 working days from the date of REG 03. Okay. Once you give this response of REG 03 and REG 04, then is again they will check if the details are complete. If the details are complete, then you will get a certificate of registration. If again it is not complete because he gave you one notice in spite of which you have not submitted the documents, then your application gets rejected. Okay, so this is how the flow of registration happens. And this is not 3 days, it is 7 days. This got amended. Earlier it was 3 days, now it is 7 days. So if details are not complete, he will have time of 7 days to ask you a question and give REG 03. नेंची CTP और RTP हमने देखा है कि लिमिट नहीं है, उनका कुछ भी लिमिट नहीं होता है. If casual taxable person has ITC in one state, can he utilize in another state? No, he cannot, because that state's registration, he can consume it only there, he cannot transfer it. Very simple process, self-explanatory. Sweetie Kumari, what is your doubt specifically? Because this is only a flow chart. Please go through this. When GSTIN is issued, GSTIN is the certificate of registration. When you get a certificate of registration, there it will have a GSTIN. Form 3 and Form 4, what is the difference? Form REG03 is a notice which the officer gives you. It is called as a show cause notice. The reply you give is in REG04. So 3 is the notice, 4 is the response. Yeah, CTP and NRTP 90 days and they can extend it. वॉलेंट्री रजिस्ट्रेशन के बाद अगर जीएसटी रजिस्ट्रेशन खत्म करना चाहते हो तो आप उसको कैंसिल कर सकते हो. यू कैन अप्लाई फॉर कैंसलेशन. ठीक है, लेट्स प्रोसीड. रजिस्ट्रेशन प्रोसीजर हम समझ गए हैं. अभी इन डिटेल एक और बार दूसरे तरह से समझाते हैं. फाइल पार्ट ए विथ टाइप, स्टेट, डिस्ट्रिक्ट नंबर, नेम, पैन, ईमेल नंबर एंड मोबाइल नंबर. फिर यू अप्लाई फॉर validation happens of the PAN from CBD database, mobile number and email number using OTPs. You get a TRN. Retrieve Part B of REG1 using TRN. Then what all details you have to fill in Part B? Business details, promoters or partners' names, authorized signatory, authorized representative, principal place of business, additional place of business, goods and services, and state-specific information, Aadhaar authentication, and verification happens. Now, Aadhaar authentication is a new concept. So that's why you'll have to understand what is Aadhaar authentication, saying that if you want to give your Aadhaar and get it authenticated. So if you do with authentication of Aadhaar, then the date of submission shall be the date of Aadhaar authentication or 15 days of submission of Part B. Okay. That will be the date of submission. If it is without authentication, then the date of submission shall be the date of submission in Part B. If Aadhaar gets authenticated, then that day itself will be the date of submission. So once you do Aadhaar authentication, within 7 working days from the date of submission, the proper officer will examine the documents and applications, and if he's satisfied, then he will approve the registration. समझ गए आप? So what happens is within 7 days, if your Aadhaar is authenticated, within 7 days, he will have to give a registration certificate, or he has to give you a notice in REG 03. अगर 7 days आपका आधार ऑथेंटिकेशन होने के बाद भी अगर नहीं मिला रजिस्ट्रेशन, तो आपको ऑटोमेटिक रजिस्ट्रेशन मिलना चाहिए, बिकॉज कट ऑफ डेट है 7 days. 7 days के बाद ऑफिसर ऑब्जेक्ट नहीं कर सकता कि ये डॉक्यूमेंट सही है, वो डॉक्यूमेंट सही नहीं है. दैट इज नॉट परमिटेड. ओके. And in case of Aadhaar not authenticated, then date of submission shall be the date of submission in Part B. उसके लिए भी 7 working days है. लेकिन Part B में क्या होता है? If the Aadhaar is not authenticated, ठीक है, then the officer will have to do a physical verification of the premises. If Aadhaar authenticated 7 days, Aadhaar not authenticated, then he will get 30 days time for physical verification. फिजिकल वेरिफिकेशन भी करेगा, डॉक्यूमेंट्स भी वेरीफाई करेगा. इफ ही इज सेटिस्फाइड, देन ही विल अप्रूव द रजिस्ट्रेशन. आधार ऑथेंटिकेशन हो गया 7 days. आधार ऑथेंटिकेशन नहीं हो, ऑफिसर विल गेट 30 days. And he will issue a notice. Then applicant will have to respond to it within 7 working days in REG 04. Applicant respond is submitted and officer is satisfied. Then within response of 7 days of response, he will give a registration. If application is not responded, or if the response is not satisfactory to the officer, he will give a order saying that I am rejecting your reasons deke, then he will reject your application. Okay. Application stage, Part A, Part B, Aadhaar authentication. Authenticated 7 days, not authenticated 30 days, because he has to come for verification and submit a report. REG2 acknowledgement means acknowledgement saying that आपका application मिल गया है. That is a acknowledgement. Bank details also mentioned. Yes, that is also mentioned. That will come back saying that either you can apply now or you could give later on. That's why you have get it a separate part for that. Okay. Now, deemed approval of registration, which means that a registration is deemed approved when if the proper officer fails to make any action. I've submitted the application. So there are timelines for the taxpayer and there are timelines for the officer also. That I have applied for registration and the officer has not taken any action. Then my application will be deemed as approved. When in cases where the person has successfully undergone authentication of Aadhaar or is exempted from Aadhaar, say in any cases, then within 7 working days, this we understood. If it is not authenticated, where the person fails to undergo Aadhaar authentication, or there is something called as risk criteria, saying that even if Aadhaar is authenticated, due to some risk criteria, the officer has to do a verification, right? Then within 30 days, within period of 30 days, it is treated as deemed approval. Agar 30 days ho gaye or he's not come for verification, then on the 30th day, he has to give you a registration. And in cases where proper officer seeking clarification and information, that is REG 03 if he gives, and you have supplied a response within the time, okay, then within 7 working days of the receiving of the clarification, he has to give registration. Okay, so it is tight bound from the and from the department perspective also. Officer cannot treat the registration lightly. Within the time limit, he has to give you a registration. प्लेस हर केस में वेरीफाई होता है? नहीं, हर केस में वेरीफाई नहीं होता है. Aadhaar authentication mandatorily who has to do? In case of an individual who is a citizen of India, then that person. A person who is not a citizen, it's not mandatory. That's why NRTP ke cases mein Aadhaar authentication is not mandatory. Authorized signatory of all types and managing and authorized partners and karta of a HGF. These are the people who has to get a mandatory Aadhaar authentication. There are some people who are exempted from Aadhaar authentication. Who are they? Persons who are exempted, persons who is not a citizen of India, department or establishment of the central government or state government, local authorities, public sector undertaking, and a person applying for UIN. So generally, all citizens of India required. Exemption is only for a citizen who is not in India, who is a person who is not a citizen of India. It's not like a person who's citizen in India has gone outside India, तो उसके लिए exemption हो जाएगा, ऐसा नहीं है. ठीक है, आप फिर registration करके बाहर चले जाओगे and then you'll tell, I'll give you my passport copy. I am not in India, so I cannot do that. That's not a exception. The exception comes only for a person who's not a citizen in India, is a non-citizen of India. Then it is exempted. Government departments, state government, central government, local authorities, public sector undertakings, it's because it is all government undertakings. For them, Aadhaar authentication is exempted. All other entities, Aadhaar authentication is compulsory. Risk-based factor, yes. Apart from the Aadhaar verification, there is some risk-based, biometric-based Aadhaar authentication, which says that the registration rule, this is a new amendment which has come in saying that just giving Aadhaar number is not sufficient. They have introduced a new biometric-based Aadhaar authentication. Just giving number and getting OTP in your Aadhaar-based mobile number is not sufficient. You have to physically go to a verification center. For test purposes, it has started in the state of Gujarat. And it has started in other states now, but for our examination purposes, the relevant state is only Gujarat, wherein you will have to carry your authentication documents for GST registration purpose, so that any kind of risk saying that somebody's Aadhaar number has taken registration, that will be avoided. So once an application has been filed for registration and the applicant has opted for authentication, it shall be followed by a biometric-based Aadhaar authentication and taking photograph. Whose photograph? Of the applicant himself in case of an individual, or the authorized person in case of non-individual. For case of company, whom they authorize, they will have to come and give their photograph, and they have to physically be present. This process will happen at a notified facilitation center. So they have started in few states. It will get enhanced to all the states slowly. So it's a risk-based, biometric-based Aadhaar authentication system. And the acknowledgement shall be issued only on completion of biometric-based authentication. Okay, so it's not that 7 days from the date of application, 7 days from the date of acknowledgement. In state of Gujarat specifically, this is started as a biometric-based Aadhaar authentication and taking photograph. Okay, further talking on Aadhaar authentication. So people who are already registered, initially this Aadhaar authentication was not there. Now they have introduced this. So what will we do? They have said that for people who are already registered, Baba, what you do is, if you're a proprietor, okay? If you're a proprietorship concern, Aadhaar authentication will be required for whom? For a proprietor and an authorized signatory. If a proprietor wants to appoint an authorized signatory, then Aadhaar authentication for both the people is required. For a partnership firm, a partner and authorized signatory. For a HUF, Karta and authorized signatory. For a company, a director and authorized signatory. Foreign authorized signatory and authorized person in India. Because foreign person who wants to register in India, they need to have one person in India. LLP will have a designated person and an authorized signatory. So basically, every constituent, in case of company, LLP, a partnership or anything, person who is managing that and plus one authorized signatory will have to get the Aadhaar authentication. In case of a society, member of a managing committee plus authorized signatory. In any other instances, association of persons, then a person who is in charge plus the authorized signatory, two people will have to get the Aadhaar authentication. Clear? Persons who are already registered, if Aadhaar authentication is not carried out, then the following functions will not work. As of now, everything should not work, but as of now, they've said that if you're already registered and you have not done your Aadhaar authentication, then you will not be able to apply for revocation of cancellation. What is revocation of cancellation will come in the further part, but you assume, but you for now understand that if your Aadhaar is not verified, then you cannot go for revocation of cancellation. You cannot file a refund application. You cannot file refund of IGST paid on export. So all this will become an hindrance. So existing registered persons apply for Aadhaar authentication. Now, Aadhaar authentication, two things again. After submission of application, authentication link will be sent to the registered mobile and email ID. Once successfully Aadhaar authenticated, then RC will be granted within 7 days. If failed to authenticate via Aadhaar OTP, then officer will conduct physical verification. First, authentication करवा लो. Authentication हो गया, सही बात है. Otherwise, you'll move to the longer process that they'll do a physical verification. Physical verification will take 30 days time. After physical verification, or in case where the Aadhaar itself is not authenticated, or you have applied for non-authentication of Aadhaar, you have not given your Aadhaar number, then compulsory physical verification. And during physical verification of principal place of business in presence of the person was required. Now this is also amended that when they come for physical place of verification, the authorized signatory, even if it is not there, they will have to do the verification and go. First, the condition was that physical verification in presence of the person. So the person had to be there. Now that is also relaxed that they will come for physical verification. The person, if he is not present, they will give their report. Then RC means registration certificate will be granted. If proper officer fails to issue within 30 days, then deemed registration, because 30 days outer time limit है, उसके बिना नहीं होगा. Okay. Persons who have already registered and they have not done Aadhaar authentication and they don't have Aadhaar, then they cannot say, I don't have Aadhaar. If you're a citizen, you have to apply. So apply now, give the Aadhaar enrollment slip and give one of these documents, either bank passbook, voter ID, passport, or driving license. Then you will be relaxed. But when, क्योंकि आपका Aadhaar enrollment apply हो चुका है, then within 30 days of you getting the Aadhaar, you update your Aadhaar. This is all on Aadhaar verification. Good. We'll take a break. I will answer all your questions on Aadhaar. Let's take a break and cut back after 5 to 7 minutes. Welcome back. We'll take up those questions first. If it is company, then whose Aadhaar? In case of company, partnership, firm, LLP, the respective organization company will not have Aadhaar, LLP will not have Aadhaar, partnership firm will not have Aadhaar. The person who is representing, right? That list we had shown, no? The director, in case of a company, director and authorized signatory. In case of a LLP, partner, LLP and partnership, the partner and the authorized signatory, they will have to get it verified. If we have biometric device, can we do the authentication through it, or we have to do the facilitation in state of Gujarat? Yeah, we have to go to the facilitation center itself, because they will verify it, because the main objective is that physically person has to be present. Otherwise, what is happening? The main reason is people take registration, do bill trading, pass on lot of input tax credit and close the business. Okay, to avoid such people, that they will have to physically verify so that they can be verified later on, can be searched later on. Isliye they will have to go to the center itself. They cannot do the verification by themselves, even if they have a biometric device. Can authorized signatory and proprietor be the same? Yes, it can be the same. Not compulsion key. You have to appoint a authorized signatory. If proprietor itself is authorized signatory, then that is also. In case of a deemed approval of application, how will you get the registration certificates? You will get it on the portal. How do you log into the portal? You will get the GST login and password. How will you get the GST login and password? It will be sent to the email ID, because at the time of verification, at the time of registration, part A, one of the important point is mobile number and email ID. So on your email ID itself, you'll get the login ID and password. In case of company or partnership, company has a separate PAN, no? So company's PAN you have to give. So if a proprietor gets converted into partnership, you have a separate PAN, right? For proprietorship, a separate PAN, and a partnership, it's a separate PAN. So you will have to apply for new registration. Existing ITC, you will have to go to the ITC chapter. Whether there is a concept of transfer of ITC, it's only in case of a merger and other things. You'll have to see whether for conversion for proprietor to partnership, is it available? If it is available, then you will get. Okay, let's proceed further. In case of a bank account details, when you do application for registration, you will also have to give the bank account details. Okay. Now, bank account details of the proprietor in case of a proprietorship, or the entity has to given at the time of application. Now, say at the time of application you don't have, then you will have to submit it within 30 days of the date of registration or the date of furnishing details of outward supply. The item amendment, pehle 45 days tha. There is an amendment which will be very relevant for your examination. So the time limit to give a bank account details is now reduced from 45 days to 30 days. So within 30 days, you have to give the details, or before furnishing the GSTR1. GSTR1 is a return which you file monthly or quarterly basis based on what supply of goods. Okay, it's not a monthly return. It's only a monthly statement wherein we give statement of outward supplies. Before you file the statement, you have to give your bank details, or within 30 days, whichever is earlier. Okay. So at the time of registration, you have the bank account, give it, no problem. So your returns can be filed. If you don't give it, then you have to give it within the outer time limit of 30 days or before filing your first GSTR1 return. But for quarterly payers, GSTR1 we don't file. They file a separate return called IFF. Before filing that IFF, you have to submit this bank details. But for TDS deductor and TCS collector and suo motu registration, bank account has to be mandatorily given at the time of application, because TDS, TCS people will not submit this GSTR1. And suo motu registration, when the officer gives the registration, there compulsorily at the time of application, bank account details has to be given. And if you don't give this bank details on time, then the system surrender, cancel, give a suspension to your registration, not cancellation. There are two stages of cancellation. First is suspension, then cancellation. So if you don't upload this bank details within 30 days time limit, then the system itself will block your registration. The portal will block through a suspension. Once you give those bank details uploaded, then the suspension will be removed. So very important, you have to give your bank details on time. Now on the physical verification part, if the PO means proper officer. So if a proper officer is satisfied that physical verification is required after the grant of registration. So after grant of registration, he can do the physical verification or before. So let us take a instance where the proper officer is satisfied that I have given a registration, but because of some information, I have to do a physical verification. PV means physical verification is required after grant of registration. Then PO shall do the verification and he shall upload the physical verification reports along with the photographs within 15 days from the date of verification. So if he does a verification and goes, he just can't keep it idle. He's granted registration and on the system, he's got the order to do a physical verification. Then that physical verification has to be done. And once he does here, there's no time limit because registration is granted. There is no outer time limit. Once registration is granted, he has to do a physical verification and upload the reports within 15 days. Another instance is physical verification is required before grant of registration. In that case, PO, the proper officer, shall upload the physical verification report with the documents where it is verified and the photographs of the premises within 5 working days before the completion of time period of registration. They said time period of registration is 30 days, right? So before the 25th day, he has to upload it. Because if he's doing verification, he will also tight bound. Because what verification is done could be questioned later on. So once he comes for physical verification, he has to upload all the documents within 25 days. Because within 30 days, he has to grant registration. And it says that 5 working days prior to the completion of time period, which means 30 minus 5, 25 days. By the 25th day, he has to do the verification and upload it. So when the registration physical verification is required before registration, he's time bound to do the verification. If it is after registration, he's not time bound because there's a gap here because it says that he has to do a physical verification and upload it from the date of verification within 15 days. What is the effective date of registration? When an applicant submits an application for registration, then, okay, now verification is over. What is the effective date of registration? If an applicant submits the application of registration within 30 days from the date, he becomes liable for registration, right? He was applicable, his threshold limit is crossed. Within 30 days, he has to apply. Now he's applied on time. He's applied within 30 days. Then the effective date of registration will become the date when he becomes liable for registration. Because when you apply for registration, they will ask you from which date are you liable. So if it is 1st March, you apply today and you will tell that I am liable for registration from 1st March. So as on 1st March, your registration certificate will be effective from 1st March because you have applied on time. But if you applied late, after 30 days you have applied, 30 days after the date he becomes liable for registration, then once the officer gives the registration, that will be the effective date. See the impact. If you apply on time, same like how we discussed on time of issue of invoice. If you issue the invoice within the stipulated time, then you don't have to pay interest. Similarly, in this case, I have applied for registration on time, then the effective date will be the date when I became liable for registration. Uska matlab kya hoga? Any input I've received after the date of registration, can claim it because I will give my registration number to them and they will give me a revised invoice and I will get a input on that. But if I've applied late, right, then whatever inputs I have for this period, I can't claim it. Correct? So the application within time is the important point in this chapter. Any question till now? I know this is a faster thing, but this chapter needs to be faster because if it gets slow, then it is going to be very dry. So let's catch up on this chapter and let's not lose any point. Okay, since there are no questions, let's proceed further. GST number, how you get it is first two digits will be unique numbers, like 29 is for Karnataka, 33 is for Mumbai. So each registration number will have 15-digit characters. First two represents the state from where you apply. From which state you apply, that two numbers will be fixed. Then the following 10 numbers is your PAN number. In case of company, company's PAN number. In case of a partnership, partnership's PAN number. Followed by one number, which is number of PAN in a state. Number of registrations in a state. Now, one registration, you get one. Second registration you apply, that become two. Then Z and 5 are the last two characters, which is Z will be by default and 5 is a check sum digit, which is a digit which the government will allow. So this is how your registration number will be. It will be, you'll have to display the registration number at a prominent location, use it in all official documents, and it should be displayed on the name board, which is displayed at the entrance of the principal place of business and also at the additional place of business. So if you don't follow these rules, then there is a penalty for that. So GST number has to be displayed at the respective places. Then we were discussing on casual taxable person and NRTP. We'll again discuss this in detail. Who is a casual taxable person? A person who occasionally undertakes transactions involving supply of goods or services or both in the course of furtherance of business, whether as principal or agent or in any other capacity, in a state or union territory where he has no fixed place of business. Like exhibition example we gave, that he's not having a fixed place of business in that state. He will take a registration there. That is a casual taxable person. Then NRTP is a non-resident taxable person. Who is he? He's the person who occasionally undertakes transactions. So if it is specifically used in both the cases, the words occasionally, which means that if it is non-occasionally, then he will have to take a proper permanent registration. But since he is doing business occasionally, a person who occasionally undertakes transaction involving supply of goods or services or both, whether as principal or agent or in any other capacity, but who has no fixed place of business or residence in India. He is called a non-resident taxable person. What are the distinctions and commonalities? A CTP has no fixed place of business in a state from where he wants to undertake supply. A NRTP has no fixed place of business in India only. He may be registered in other state. He may be registered in one state. That doesn't matter. In the other state, he has to take a CTP. But an NRTP, if he's registered in India, then he's not an NRTP. He is not having a registration in any other state, any state as such. Then CTP needs to register in every state. NRTP also needs to register in the states where he seeks to supply. In case of a casual taxable person, PAN is mandatory. In NRTP, passport for individual, because if he's an individual coming, then he will not have a PAN. So you get your passport. And if it's a business entity, then you get your tax identification number, because like how we have certificate of incorporation number, then similarly in respective countries, you will have a tax identification number, get that number. The procedure for CTP is normal REG01, but for NRTP, the procedure is different. You have to apply through REG09. It should be duly verified by the registered person. In case of NRTP, duly verified, signed and verified through EVC, electronic verification code, by the authorized signatory, who shall be a person resident in India having a valid PAN. So NRTP should authorize a person in India who is having a valid PAN. Okay. But the common points for both are both CTP and NRTP cannot opt for tax under composition levy. Okay. Then there is no centralized scheme saying that one registration for across is not possible. Advance deposit has to be made. Threshold limit will not apply. From rupee 1, they have to register, except for CTP when he's dealing with handicrafts and craftsman goods. And You have to give an advance deposit before doing any sale because you are come here for temporary registration purposes. So deposit taxes in advance. How much will be the advance? The officer will decide based on the estimate sales. Then apply 5 days before commencement of business in both the cases. Validity of registration is period specified in the registration application. So in application, if I say I want a registration for 45 days, officer will give for 45 days. But if nothing is mentioned, then he will generally give for 90 days from the effective date of registration. Plus, it can be extended to another 90 days. Okay, so this is the CTP and NRTP provision. How do you check GST registration number is valid or no? On the GST portal, Harshit. On GST portal, you mention the GST number, you'll get all the details, and you'll also get to know whether the GST registration number is valid or no. Let me take you through that example. I'm sharing my screen. So you have to go to GST portal, gst.gov.in. Here you have to click on search taxpayer. You have various criteria to search by GST number or UIN, search by PAN, search by temporary ID, or search a composite taxpayer. So we'll search by GST IN number. For instance, I'll put my GST number and mention the CAPTCHA code. Okay, then click on search. So you get the complete details. What is the legal name of business, trade name, effective date of registration. Here you will get to know whether it's active or inactive. If it's active, it means the GST is valid. Service provider and other details. So all those details will be appearing over here. Whether you're a regular taxpayer or a composite taxpayer or a CTP will appear here. Your jurisdiction and principal place of business, everything will appear. Just you have to mention the GST of the person. Okay. So next is once you apply for registration, you may want to go for amendment. There are two, if there's any changes in the details, what you're given at the time of registration, you want to go for amendment. So amendment could be of two things. One is core fields, another is non-core fields. Core field means those fields which are core for the registration, which will need approval of the officer. What are those core fields? Example is name of the business, addition of the stakeholders, principal place of business. Then they are core fields. It requires approval of the officer. Non-core fields are like changes in mobile number, email ID. Those things are non-core fields that approval of the officer is not required. Once you give a new mobile number, it will get authenticated. Your new registration will be effective immediately. So that's a officer's intervention is not required. The non-core fields, officer intervention not required. For core fields, officer intention has to verify it, approve it. Now, let me get you this aspect. So if there is a change in PAN itself, first is amendment of the PAN, then you will get a new registration certificate. You cannot do an amendment. Okay. So if there's any change in PAN, say from proprietorship, you are shifting it to partnership. So it's a new PAN, new constituency, new kind of setup, then you have to apply for fresh registration. But if there is any kind of change, say name of the business, PAN is same, address is getting changed, directors, partners are getting added. But if a proprietor is getting added, then it's a new business. You have to apply with a fresh registration. Change name of the business, then apply through form REG 014. Apply, and then if the officer is satisfied, then he will issue a new registration within 15 days with the amendment details. If he needs clarification, again, he will give a show cause notice in REG 03. Applicant has to reply within 7 days in again same REG 04. The same forms which we gave for registration, fresh registration, REG 03 and 04 were there, right? Same, those things will come here. Then you give this to the officer. There's no response, then change is amended, right? If he gives a response, then you will get a new REG 15. If he rejects it, then you will get a rejection document in REG 05. That means your old registration will continue. Your new amendment is not approved. If he approves, he'll give it an REG 15. If it doesn't give, then your REG 5 will be a order saying that because of these reasons, I'm rejecting. So any rejection of registration or amendment has to be supported with reasons. Okay. Now let's go into the concept of cancellation of registration. Okay, you have got a registration. Now you have to cancel this. CTP can take ITC, I think not. In your input tax credit, what did you understand? In CTP also can take ITC, right? So CTP can take ITC, but NRTP cannot take ITC. Cancellation of registration is possible in multiple instances. Cancellation by the taxpayer himself when his turnover is below. Like somebody has asked the question that I voluntarily applied for registration. Now I want to cancel it. Can I cancel it? Yes, you can cancel it if your limit is gone below the 20 lakhs limit. And cancellation by authorized tax officer when the officer feels that you have done something wrong. We'll come to those instances if you have not followed the rules properly, not filed the returns regularly. In such cases, the officer can cancel it, or the cancellation can happen by a legal heir. That is, in case of death of a taxpayer, the legal heirs can apply for cancellation and your registration will get cancelled. Okay. Now, cancellation by a registered person on his own account or by the department will be in following cases when the business is discontinued. Business is discontinued होगा तो registration लग के क्या करोगे? It will get cancelled. You can apply for cancellation. When another instances in case of death of a proprietor, it's completely transferred to a new person. Then also the existing registration will get cancelled, or it is amalgamated with any other legal entity. Then old will get cancelled. Demerged, you're getting demerged and new entities getting formed, right? Two new entities are getting formed in a demerger case. Then your old registration has to get cancelled, or it is otherwise disposed of, or your business is getting sold off. Then all of these cases you can apply for cancellation. Or change in constitution of a business like proprietor to partnership, partnership to a private limited. ITC is a separate part. We are just dealing with cancellation. So all your existing registration, you have to cancel it. Or a taxable person who is not liable to be registered under 22 or 24 or who intends to opt out of voluntary registration, right? Then you can apply for cancellation. When can the proper officer do cancellation? If you're not conducting business from the declared place of business. You have taken registration at the declared place of business. Officer came for verification, but after a series of time, he is seeing that you're not doing business from that place. Then why do you need registration? Cancel it. These are the instances when the officer will cancel it. Second is invoices issuing. You're issuing invoices, but not supplying goods. You have to issue invoice only when you supply goods, right? But you're issuing invoices without supply, which means it's a concept which is called as bill trading. You're only trading in bills, not in goods. So it's a fake practice. So to stop that practice, the officer will cancel your registration. Then if any person is paying tax under composition, now you've taken registration under composition, but you have failed to furnish the GST returns beyond 3 months. So composition taxpayers have to file yearly one return. Okay. In that return also, it's just a 1 yearly return and you have to pay taxes monthly. Now you're not paid taxes monthly and you're not furnished your returns within 3 months, okay, by yearly ones, and you get 3 months time. Within that, if you are not filed it, the registration will get cancelled. A regular taxpayer, if he fails to file GST returns for continuous period of 6 months, if the monthly filer, monthly 6 months you are not filed, and if you are a quarterly filer, you have not filed returns for 2 quarters, then also your registration get cancelled. So be careful that file your returns on time. If you delay also, don't delay it beyond 6 months. It will revoke for cancellation of registration. And availing ITC, you are availing input tax credit in violation of section 15. More ITC you are claiming than what you should claim. That is also lead to cancellation. Or registration itself are obtained through fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of facts. You have just given wrong information and the officer gets to know. Then also your registration can get cancelled. So these are the instances when your registration can be cancelled by the officer. Cancellation, what are the additional reasons? Availing ITC in violation of section 16, we said, right? That will be when you're violating provision of 86B, which means what is 86B in ITC chapter you would have learned, right? What is 86B? What is cancellation through suo moto? That I myself cancel it. That is called suo moto cancellation. Okay, let's do a revision of ITC because you have understood the chapter, right? ITC is completed. What was the concept of Rule 86B, which was very important concept in ITC? Eighty-six B, RAM is not when Assistant Commissioner blocks credit. No, that's not 86B. Harish Chandar, in cash, what do you mean? If sales is more than 50 lakhs, 1% of tax is to be paid in cash. Correct. So Harish Chandar, Sweetie Kumari, Deep Dholaria, 50 lakhs, not 110 lakhs, 1 lakh, what you have mentioned. 86B limits the utilization of ITC, right? Nishtala, Kadambari, Jay, Sangeetavani. Yes. So 86B says that if you are a person and a specified person, which means if you are having sales more than 50 lakhs, supply more than 50 lakhs, then full ITC credit you should not utilize. Only 99% you can utilize and 1% you should pay from cash. That is the requirement of 86B. Now, there is no cap or the blockage under the GST portal. You have to voluntarily follow it. Now, if you don't follow this, then and you have utilized full ITC, then also your registration can get cancelled. So you have to be careful that a person who's having turnover more than 50 lakhs, full credit you should not use. Of course, there are exceptions to that. If you're following under exceptions that your claimed refund and you've got it, then those conditions will not apply to you. So if you're following under the exceptions, fine. Otherwise, if you're not following, then you cannot utilize 100% from the credit. You have to utilize 99% only. So that is basically, if you're violating those provisions, then also your registration can get cancelled. Or if you're furnishing details of your outward supplies in GSTR1 for more than one or more tax periods, which is in excess of your returns, okay, then also you will go for cancellation, because what you supply and what you pay taxes for small amount and you have supplied more. So the receiver will get more credit. It means you're giving more credit unnecessarily. So if you're giving more credit and it is not justified, because before cancellation, officer will give you a show cause notice. And if you're not satisfying the officer that time also, saying that why there is a difference, then your registration can get cancelled. How to cancel GST is proprietor is dead. So there is a procedure for that the officer will give you access to that, and you have to apply for cancellation. Okay. Next is suspension of registration. Before cancellation, there is a concept of suspension. Okay. When an application is made for cancellation of registration, whether by taxable person or department, it takes time, right? So cancellation cannot happen immediately, because all your previous dues has to be checked. Only then cancellation will be issued. If there's any open case, it has to be verified. That's why they will not get cancellation immediately. During the period, proper officer means the officer to whom you apply for cancellation, he will not cancel it, he will suspend it. Okay. What is the concept of suspension? That during the period of suspension, you cannot do any kind of sales, right? But you have to do all your compliances. A registered person who is applied for cancellation, what will be the period of suspension? From the date of submission of application for cancellation, or from the date when cancellation is sought, because you can apply for cancellation today with a prior date, saying that on the 1st of March, from the 1st of March, my registration is to be cancelled. I will apply today, permitted. So either from 1st of March or from today, whichever is later, from that date till the date of completion of cancellation, that will be suspension period. Okay. During suspension period, a registered person shall not make any taxable supplies and file any GST returns for this period. For the old period which you have not filed, you can file it. From the date of suspension till the date of cancellation, you cannot file any returns for this period. In this way, a taxpayer is good because he is freed from filing any GST compliances. Okay. He will, because once cancelled, will the officer approve or no? Later, if he approves, then for this period, I have to file the GST returns. To get away with this, the suspension scheme is there, wherein you can't make any supplies, but all your previous compliances can be cleared now. And if I apply for cancellation on my own, then the suspension period is from the date of effective date of suspension or the date of application, whichever is later, till the date of actual cancellation. If the officer initiates cancellation, right? We know that in the previous slide, we have understood when I violate some of the conditions, then the officer will cancel the registration. That cancellation, the effective date will be from the date which will be decided by the officer. Because in my case, I can tell the date, but in his case, he will have to decide the date. Because he is seeing that I have violated the conditions, then he will consider the date. From the date what he is deciding till the date of completion of the cancellation, that is the period of suspension. Okay. Again, during suspension, I cannot make any sales and I will be freed from filing compliance for the period. The expression shall not make any taxable supply means that a registered person shall not issue a tax invoice and not charge tax on supplies made during this period, because you are suspended. Then how can you make any supplies? You should not make. In case an order came for reversal of suspension, the taxpayer has to do what? He has to issue revised tax invoice and file first return for the supplies made during the period of suspension. Now, in spite of suspending your made sales, you cannot do anything during suspension. If your order is getting cancelled, you will have to file the taxes and the returns for that period. Okay. Suspension of GST registration, which is amended, it says that proper officer can suspend registration without affording a reasonable opportunity of being heard. Suspension can be done without giving a reasonable opportunity, but cancellation cannot be done, right? Because suspension is a temporary stage. After that, you will get an opportunity to represent your case. So that's why suspension can be without giving reasons, but cancellation cannot be. So there's two phases. One is suspension phase, then comes the cancellation phase. When can the suspension happen? When the comparison of returns furnished by the registered person with the details of outward supply in GSTR 1. So you're giving a outward supply, that and your returns, there is a mismatch, or your inward, you're claiming more credit than how much you can claim. In ITC, you have understood, right? GSTR 2A and GSTR 2B has to be verified. Compared to that, you're claiming more credit. In these instances, the officer can suspend. Then a registered person whose registration has been suspended shall not be granted any refund under Section 54 during the period of suspension. Very important. So any old refunds are there, will all get blocked. So if you're doing anything wrong, the officer can suspend your registration. But if you are applying for suspension, make sure that all your refunds have been claimed and received. Then the suspense of registration shall be deemed to be revoked upon completion of cancellation proceedings with effect from the date on which suspension had taken into effect. So you have applied for suspension, officer is verified, and he said, okay, then your date of cancellation will be the original date of suspension itself. Then procedure for cancellation, you again have two things, voluntary cancellation or so you should electronically submit an application within 30 days of the occurrence of an event, furnish the details. At the time of cancellation, whatever ITC you have claimed on the stocks, you will have to pay it. So furnish details of all the inputs held in stock, because when you purchased, you claim the credit. Now you're not selling it. The credit government has given that you will sell it. You have not sold it. So whatever stock is lying, you have to give all the details of inputs, what is there. Then proper officer will pass an order within 30 days from the application submitted, where it is suo motu cancellation, where the officer goes for cancellation. He will issue a show cause notice, and the registered person has to reply within 7 days. If reply is satisfactory, the officer will drop the cancellation. Else, he will issue a cancellation order again within 30 days. Effective date of cancellation will be the date determined by the officer in suo motu cancellation. In case of voluntary cancellation, I will give the date. What is the amount payable on cancellation? You have two kinds of amounts which you have to pay. One is on your inputs and one is on your capital goods. How is it determined? ITC in respect of input calculated in accordance with Rule 44. That is ITC on inputs computed proportionately on the basis of corresponding invoices on which credit has been claimed, or output tax payable, whichever is higher. So if you have sold everything, you will pay. Nothing is left in the stock. If something is left in the stock as on the date of cancellation and you have not paid GST on that, so you will see what is the ITC you have claimed on that. If there are 100 units, when you bought, you had claimed credit on 1,000. So proportionately 1/10 ITC, all the GST payable on those supplies, whichever is higher, has to be paid. Because at the time of sale, you will be selling it for less value, saying it's a scrap. But government will not lose that benefit, saying that you have taken credit of 100 rupees. Now you are saying output is only 10 rupees, 90 rupees lost to the government, government will not bear. So you have to pay 100 or 10, whichever is higher. In case of capital goods, ITC in respect of capital goods or plant and machinery calculated in accordance with Rule 44, which is ITC is calculated for the remaining useful life of the capital asset computed on pro rata basis, taking useful life as 5 years. So like how we have depreciation under income tax, similarly in GST also you'll get that benefit. What benefit? That if you have taken a capital goods, ITC input tax credit will get fully, right? At the time of IT purchase of capital goods itself, full credit is given with a trust that you will use the asset for minimum 5 years. Computers, plant and machinery, furniture and fittings, different rates of depreciation, different useful life is there under income tax and company law. But for GST, all capital assets have a assumed fixed useful life of 5 years. So if you have used it for 5 years, good. So the ITC, they are giving you 100%. At the time of sale, you had bought the asset, used it for 2 years, right? So for 2 years input tax credit, proportionate, you will reduce. The balance 3 years is the unutilized ITC. So that or the tax on the outward supply. On when you sell the asset, what is the outward tax or this unutilized ITC, whichever is higher has to be paid. Got it? So in case of input tax, ITC or GST on output, whichever is higher. In case of capital good, unclaimed ITC for the unused portion or output tax, whichever is higher has to be paid. Clear on this unutilized ITC? This means we have to reverse the unavailed ITC. Yeah, basically reverse it. How will you reverse? If you have credit balance, then you will reverse it. If you don't have sufficient credit balance, you will pay from your cash ledger itself. Okay. So at the time of cancellation, credit will not be given out to you. Credit on goods, either you clear off those goods, because when you clear off those goods, you will pay tax. So no problem. Stock is zero, no problem. If stock is there, only there's a problem that you will have to reverse the ITC or the tax on your outward supply, whichever is higher. Now revocation of cancellation, that cancellation is happened. Officer is given you given a cancellation. Now you can revoke the cancellation. Okay, another opportunity is given to you. Once a cancellation is there, then you can apply for revocation when within 30 days from the service of order of cancellation. First is suspension, then cancellation. Then after cancellation also you can go, because once the registration is cancelled, it impacts your input tax credit, it impacts your supply chain. That's why government is giving you multiple options, multiple choices. Okay, so first is suspension, then cancellation, then revocation. Registration is cancelled, GST portal will still be active. You can apply for revocation within 30 days from the date of service of order of cancellation. If you have delayed for some reason, then still they're giving up another opportunity. Then you can apply for cancellation later than 30 years, but you should obtain approval from the higher up. Who is the higher up? Generally, cancellation will happen by the made by the proper officer. If you have delayed it, then go to his higher up, who is the assistant commissioner or a joint commissioner or commissioner. Additional commissioner, joint commissioner or commissioner, as the case is applicable. You have to go take his permission for applying for revocation, which means you have to give him sufficient cause why you have delayed it. You were out of town, not aware, unwell. Give a proper reason. If the officer is convinced, then he will tell, okay, you apply for revocation. So once you apply for revocation, two things. One is apply within 30 days time. No need of anybody's permission. If you apply beyond 30 days time, then you need permission of the additional commissioner, joint commissioner, or the commissioner himself. And if you apply for revocation with reasons, if the proper officer is satisfied, he will revoke the cancellation order within 30 days of the receipt of application. If he is not satisfied for your reason for revocation, then he will reject and issue a show cause notice. Then the officer will have to dispose of the application within 30 days. Okay, so anything which the officer does which impacts the taxpayers negatively, they will have to give a show cause notice and an order. So even in case of cancellation, I have an opportunity to apply for revocation. If he is satisfied, revoke it. Okay, my registration will come back to normalcy. It will come as cancellation is cancelled and my registration is active. But if he's not satisfied, he will give me a show cause notice. If I respond that within 30 days, he will have to give a order. When registration was cancelled for failure to furnish returns. Okay. So that's a genuine case that I have not filed my returns and the officer has cancelled it. Then in that case, he will revoke it when date from which returns are not furnished till the date of order of cancellation of registration. Okay. At this point, he gave me a cancellation. Returns for this period are to be filed. Then returns for this period, say here it is revocated. Date of order of revocation of cancellation is passed. Then returns for this period has to be filed when, wherein after cancellation, I'm not able to file the return, sir. Okay, I'll give you a revocation. Your cancellation is revoked. But within 30 days, you have to clear your returns. Because the main reason why I cancelled your registration was you didn't file your returns. I will give you the opportunity now saying that you have promised that, okay, you will do the corrections. When you should do it? Within 30 days from the order of revocation of cancellation. Okay. That is scenario one. Now, scenario two is date from which returns are not filed. Then order of cancellation has happened. Then you get an order of revocation. Then return for this period is to be filed within 30 days from the date of order of cancellation, order of revocation of cancellation. So scenario one and scenario two is different, wherein returns for this period to be filed before applying for revocation of cancellation, which means that from the date returns are not filed till the date of effective date of cancellation, you should file your returns. Then you should go for revocation. And in a case where the second scenario where returns are not furnished and returns date of order of cancellation of registration, when the effective date of cancellation itself is this, then you will not be able to file any returns for this period, right? From the for the effective date before the effective date of cancellation, because if it is cancellation by the officer, he can give any date, right? If he gives a date prior to your date of non-filing, you can't do anything. But if it is after the date of non-filing, for the interim period, you can file it. So file those returns and then go for revocation. If those effective date is the date when you have not filed the return itself, then from that effective date till the date of order of revocation, all of that has to be filed within 30 days. Then final aspect is who is ineligible for apply for cancel revocation. That I cannot go for revocation itself when GST registration was cancelled voluntary by the taxpayer. You yourself has applied for cancellation. Now you are going for revocation, not possible. But when the officer has cancelled it, then you have opportunity for revocation. You yourself went for cancellation. Now you're saying, no, your mind has got changed, so please revoke it. Not possible. By UIN holders also, if it is cancelled, then you can go for revocation. GST practitioner. GST practitioner is a separate registration. If a GST practitioner's registration is cancelled, they also cannot go for revocation. You have to go for fresh registration in such cases. And registration is cancelled on the request of legal heir. On the death of a proprietor or death of a person, the legal heir will apply for cancellation. Then that is also equal to voluntary cancellation. In that case, also you can't go for revocation. Then cancellation is one important aspect is cancellation under one law means cancellation under all laws. So there's no how we have one registration for all the acts, CGST, SDST, IGST, cess. Similarly, cancellation is cancellation for all acts. Okay. Any doubts till now on what we have discussed on complete registration aspect? Okay. Can you explain scenario 2? Yeah. Scenario 2 is, say, I'll give this with examples so we'll understand. From 1st January, date from which returns are not furnished is 1st January is my, I filed returns up till 31st December. From 1st January, I've not filed the return. On 1st March, I've got an order for cancellation, right? And in this cancellation, the effective date is from 1st March, from 1st January. I've got the cancellation order on 1st March. Okay, which means January, February, 2 months returns, I couldn't file it. In this order of cancellation, officer has given effective date of cancellation as 1st January. Okay, now prior to 1st January, I can file it because prior to this, any returns, the effective date is 1st January. So November and December, in case I've not filed the return, I couldn't file it. But in my case, 1st January onwards, I've not filed the returns. And the effective date of cancellation is 1st Jan. So, sir, I have made sales, but you're given a cancellation from 1st January, so I'm not able to file it. So I'll go for revocation. So he will give me an order of revocation and say that, okay, the cancellation is revoked, means cancellation is reversed. So then from this order, say this order is come on 31st March. Okay. Then 31st March means from 31st March, I'll get 30 days to file returns from 1st January. So whatever sales I've made from 1st January to February, I can file a return for this period within 31st March, matlab within 30th April, I have to file a return for this whole period, which is from 1st Jan to 30th March, effectively 28th Feb, because after 28th Feb, I would not have done any sales. In case I've done also, I can file it within 30 days. In first scenario is I have 1st March, 1st January, I have not filed the returns. Effective date was from 1st February. So at least for the, before I go for revocation, is to be filed from before I go for revocation for Jan to February period was open. I have to file that and then go for revocation. Okay. So it all depends from the effective date of cancellation, what the officer gives. Clear, Nishtala? If someone has the ITC and he wants to cancel the registration, he can go for cancellation. He has to forego the ITC because ITC balance remaining and you've gone for cancellation, you cannot utilize your ITC. What is the difference between cancellation and revocation? Cancellation means cancelled. Revocation means reversing the cancellation matter. That is called cancellation. सस्पेंशन में कैंसलेशन को एक के साथ हिंदी में प्लीज एक्सप्लेन. सस्पेंशन वो होता है जब मैं कैंसलेशन अप्लाई करता हूं मेरी तरफ से, तब इमीडिएटली कैंसलेशन नहीं देते हैं, उसको सस्पेंड कर देते हैं. मतलब आपको रिटर्न्स फाइल करने की जरूरत नहीं है, आपके रिक्वेस्ट अभी होल्ड पे है. तो इसीलिए क्या करेंगे बताता हूँ. यहाँ पे आपने कैंसलेशन के लिए अप्लाई किया, क्योंकि आपको सस्पेंशन एप्लीकेशन नहीं होता है, कैंसलेशन का एप्लीकेशन होता है. आपने कैंसलेशन के अप्लाई किया तो आपने जो डेट लिखा है उस डेट से या डेट ऑफ एप्लीकेशन से आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन सस्पेंड हो गया है. सस्पेंड कब तक होगा? तब तक ऑफिसर अप्रूव नहीं करता है, तब तक आपका सस्पेंशन मोड में है. अगर ऑफिसर अप्रूव कर देगा तो फिर उस डेट से कैंसलेशन हो जाएगा. लेकिन अगर ऑफिसर कैंसलेशन करना चाहते हैं तो उनके पास दो ऑप्शन है, वो सस्पेंड कर सकते हैं या कैंसिल कर सकते हैं. अगर सस्पेंड करते हैं तब उनके बताए डेट से कैंसलेशन तक आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन सस्पेंशन मोड में है, आप कुछ रिटर्न्स फाइल नहीं कर सकते. लेकिन सस्पेंशन जब ऑफिसर करते हैं तब उनके पास कैंसलेशन करने का भी ऑप्शन है या फिर सस्पेंशन को निकालने का भी ऑप्शन है. जब वो सस्पेंशन निकाल देंगे तब सस्पेंशन पीरियड से कैंसलेशन पीरियड तक जो भी रिटर्न है आपको फाइल करना पड़ेगा, फिर आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन चालू है. या तो डायरेक्टली भी कैंसिल कर सकता है। जब वो कैंसिल करेगा, फिर आपको एक और अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है कि कैंसिलेशन करने के बाद भी आपको रिवोकेशन का अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है कि ये कैंसिलेशन सही नहीं है, प्लीज आपको इसको हटा दीजिए, उसे कहते हैं रिवोकेशन। तो कैंसिलेशन का रिवोकेशन जब करेंगे तो पूरा, अगर रिवोकेशन मान जाते हैं ऑफिसर, तो हमने जो रिटर्न सबमिट नहीं किया है वो 30 दिन के अंदर हमको सबमिट करना पड़ेगा। सो ये है सस्पेंशन, कैंसिलेशन एंड रिवोकेशन। If someone has more than one business and wants to take ITC from all the business, so can he take ITC from all the businesses? Yeah, he can take. If it is one registration, he can take all ITC in one registration. If he has multiple registrations, then he cannot pass from one business to another business if he has multiple registrations. Monthly filing is assessee's choice, not actually for a large taxpayer where your turnover is more than 1.5 crores. You have to compulsory more than 5 crores, not 1.5 crores. If your turnover is more than 5 crores, you have to compulsorily go for monthly filing itself. Okay, but if it is below 5 crores, then you have option of quarterly or monthly. Below 5 crores, you have the option. Above 5 crores, it is compulsorily monthly returns. Any other doubts? ओके, इन सस्पेंशन में दो डेट्स हैं. डेट ऑफ सबमिशन मीन्स व्हेन अप्लाइड फ्रॉम, एंड डेट ऑफ कैंसिलेशन इज सॉट मीन्स. डेट ऑफ सबमिशन इज डेट ऑफ एप्लीकेशन, एंड डेट ऑफ सॉर्ट मीन्स मैं जब अप्लाई करता हूँ उसमें डेट मेंशन कर सकता हूँ कि एप्लीकेशन के पहले के डेट से सस्पेंड कीजिए. तो वो डेट है डेट ऑफ कैंसिलेशन सॉर्ट, एंड डेट ऑफ सबमिशन इज एक्चुअल सबमिशन डेट. जब मैं आज सबमिट करता हूँ तो आज का डेट है. डेट ऑफ कैंसिलेशन इज जो पहले का डेट भी मैं डाल सकता हूँ, उसे है डेट ऑफ कैंसिलेशन सॉर्ट. Cancellation of registration, second point. Okay, cancellation of registration. Nishtala, just tell me which slide is this you're asking query on. For repayment of unutilized ITC, can we use current ITC? Yes, you can use current ITC. Immediately after finish the session, I will send this PDF, so they should be uploading by a day. Yeah, Sangeetvani, yeah, you're right. 50 lakhs, then 1% taxpayer compulsory. Yes. Are you saying this point? Additional reasons. Additional reasons means, so any other reasons wherein we have mentioned here the reasons which is other reasons, right? Other reasons basically is when there's a business discontinuity, transfer of business, those are the additional reasons. Non-compliance with any provisions of GST, those are all the additional reasons. ITC, Harish, you'll have to read the specific ITC because in case of amalgamation, demerger, those cases, ITC can be transferred. But in other cases, specifically you read the ITC chapters, then you'll get a clarity. Okay, I think we've answered all the queries. So this will be uploaded. We'll touch base again tomorrow on the next chapter. Okay. Is on tax invoice, credit notes, and debit notes. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks for understanding the registration chapter. We'll now proceed with other chapters then.